My name is Belle, and I am an artist from the Virgin Islands. I work in many different media, so I would be called an interdisciplinary artist or a multidisciplinary artist. I work in photography, painting, sculpture, public interventions, video, writing is also part of my practice. I would say that I probably always was artistically inclined. I was that kid in school who could draw good. I was kind of the teacher's pet. Leo Cardi was my art teacher from 7 to 17. So he was a mentor to me and always encouraged me to be an artist. I had other ideas. So when I went to school, I actually went pre-med to Columbia University in New York. And then very quickly discovered that's not really what I wanted to do. But I wasn't exactly sure. As I mentioned, I always did art. I always was in special summer programs and things like that for kids who are artistically inclined visually. But then I decided to take an art class my junior year in college, and then that really solidified that I wanted to be an artist. But I also did a lot of writing too, so I have a very strong writing background. So I wouldn't consider myself self-taught, although, I didn't have a traditional arts education. After I graduated, I went back home to St. Croix. A lot of people go to New York to be an artist. I left New York to become an artist. And then I decided I did want more schooling, so I went to art school in Cuba. As I was coming down here for the interview, I was saying to myself, I said goodbye to my children to tell them that I'm flying halfway across the world to go film a sunset. That's kind of wild. And I just thought, that's why, that's what I do in my life. I'm going on a place I've never been to before because I have this curiosity about seeing what the other side of the American empire looks like. And I want to be able to share that curiosity and investigation with others. So I think it's a deep curiosity about what the types of things that you can learn and explore through art making that you can't really do in other parts of life. I chose this piece because a couple years ago, I had my partner, the very first time he came into my studio, he asked me, I had been telling him that, because I am multidisciplinary, sometimes I feel like if people see my work, like the visuality of it, they might think I'm schizophrenic, or it's like, it looks like 6 people could have made it maybe. I sometimes feel a little unsure about that. And he said to me, well, if you made something that incorporates all the things that you think about, what would that look like? You have this Cheney series that you've been working about with the fragmentation of these found pottery fragments and repainting those images. You have this cuts and burns that you're doing. You have this interest in archive. You have, he and I kind of thought, what would that look like? And this series is what emerged from that question. In about 2015, I had this interest in working with the quintessential palm tree image. Sometimes as a Caribbean artist, you think about yourself as like, I'm a serious artist. I'm not painting palm trees. But that's kind of, maybe you might associate that with just tourist art. But I really thought that that iconic palm tree image could maybe be reimagined, that it was something I could say, and I wanted to dare myself. So I started doing these very small charcoal drawings of palm trees in a storm, because I thought if the way that we're presented is this tranquil, languid space, calm and serene, but that's the complexities of the Caribbean are much more apparent than that. I wanted to see if I could use that iconic image to reimagine it and say something with it. So I did these black and white charcoal drawings of storms. And then, of course, in 2017, we had the two Category 5 storms. I mean, of course, I've experienced a major hurricane. I'm old enough to have experienced Hurricane Hugo in 1989, but I was a child. This is the first time having to experience the aftermath of a storm. And then reminded about what those storms mean for our societies, but also really, we're almost kind of always living in a mini storm. Colonialism is a kind of a storm, but also I thought about how we can kind of harness these natural forces to transform, because storms are also quite transformative. They clean out things, they take away things, they allow for new growth. So, you know, I was thinking about all of those different kinds of metaphors. But what did happen in my studio during the storm is it got damaged. I thought I had saved some of my materials. I mean, I lost some things, artwork materials, but some of it was wrapped in plastic, so I thought it was saved. And then a couple years later, when I went to actually use it and I started to roll it out, it was so brittle because it had gotten moisture inside that it started to crack and rip. And I almost threw it out until a friend of mine reminded, but Vaugn, your work deals with archives. I mean, this is an archive to the storm. So why don't you use it in your work? So that's where now thinking about the palm tree again, but now thinking about using these pieces and fragments and piecing them together to create these larger topographies, almost these larger maps. You could think about the work also as a kind of a map. And then I also use other parts of my practice that have been long-standing, like the cuts and burns. So there's also these small cuts and burns inside the paper that for me represent this kind of visuality of resistance, about how every major rebellion in the Caribbean was fought with cutlass and fire. And so in some ways, when you're thinking about the work as a type of geography or a map, that it's registering it's another kind of archive too. It's like registering. There's spaces in the work that's tranquil and really beautiful, and there's spaces where islands feel like they're coming out of the ocean or disappearing into the ocean. So there's a lot inside the work that I think kind of represents the full complexity of the Caribbean experience, which is what I'm trying to capture. So this piece is called Storm, and in parentheses, how to imagine the Tropicalia as monumental, and then dash as in lament. So I would say that one of my biggest lows was right after I Am Queen Mary was inaugurated, and we were in the New York Times, and we had just done an interview with the BBC, and there was a Guardian article coming out. I mean, you know, it was like press after press and celebration. And I opened up my phone, and online there was a counter thread calling us horrible things and disparaging our character and our work. And it was just ballooning online. And then that contrast to being in Denmark and having being in this incredible high, and then seeing the controversy that was erupting at home was a low. I became notorious overnight. I didn't expect that. And I think that for me, what I learned from that experience was that if you're making a public art project as significant as I Am Queen Mary is, it is expected that the public dialogue will literally have counter viewpoints, which is what a controversy is. It's going to have some people who think it's amazing and other people who think it's all the things, all the other non-amazing things. And that is actually means that the work is doing its job. That was a hard lesson to learn, but a very valuable lesson to learn. Because I had an impulse to jump into the fray and explain, or try to explain what we were really, and I realized that if I had done that we would have directed the conversation. Of public art, one of the main goals of public art is to create dialogue. It's not just to put a pretty object in the public space. It's to get people to have conversations about memory and history and representation. And that is actually what happened. people who never maybe thought about representation, issues of representation in art, we're now having debates about what that means to put yourself in an image. Why is it the size it is? I mean, why is it sitting? Why, the figure sit? I mean, there were so many questions that our work generated and for people to think about and talk about. And that, although it was a low, for my ego or, just even, not even just ego, it's like you make something in the world, you want people to like it. I mean, that's who we are as people, that's human. And to have that experience was very hard. I got through it by honoring my feelings about it, honoring the challenges that I felt and had dealing with it. But I also had a mentor who works in public art, who's from St. Croix. Actually, his name is Kendall Henry. I'll mention him because he's such a dear person, and he was really the one who, because of his specialty in public art, was able to tell me, this means your work is actually doing its job, and it's a phenomenal piece of work, and the controversy and the dialogue and the debate is actually what you want. And just try. I know it's hard, but just, he really encouraged me just to write it out, and that's how I got through it.